Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to convene the May 22nd meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. Welcome to commission members and to those that are standing in for commission members and those in the public that are joining us for our meeting today. We will take the roll call after a few introductory remarks, and then we'll also provide an opportunity for commission members to provide any brief updates they might want to provide after the roll call. One thing I wanted to acknowledge up front is that Zach and I have been talking about ways that we can kind of improve how we manage public comments. We get a combination of requests and comments through two different channels currently that are set up, and that makes it a little hard to track and to make sure that we're kind of getting the comments that people want in front of the commission separated from the requests that come in for us to respond to in between meetings. And so we did, I think, Zach, we've posted the comments now, but just did that this morning, and they were not distributed to the commission in advance. None of the comments were directed to agenda items today, and most of them were requests for information and from staff and the commission. So we will resolve the challenges that we've had or come up with a better approach for making sure we're being as responsive to the public as we can be before our next meeting. We will have time for public comment in today's meeting, and that's estimated to occur around 2:30. And Zach and Stacy, I don't know how many people we currently have on from the public to know if we should postpone having you do the kind of, this is how we will manage the public comments, or maybe wait until a little later in the process to do that. Do you have a recommendation on that, Zach?
It looks like we have a fair amount of folks, so I think we should just
great.
Do that.
Great. Well, then if you will just remind people how they can let us know that they want to provide testimony during the meeting. Depending on how many people want to testify, we will ask people to confine their comments to either 1 or 3 minutes, and also want the public to know if for some reason we can't get to all the comments, which usually we're able to do, but just in case, you are welcome to send us your testimony after the meeting, and we'll distribute that to commission members. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach, you and Stacy to remind people how to do that.
Sure. Thanks, Chair McDonald. So just as my interface is a little different because I'm sharing my screen, but I believe there is a smiley face emoji at the bottom of the screen for folks from the public. And if you click on that or near that, you should be able to then see a hand icon that can let us know that you would like to speak during public comment. And then once we see that you're interested in speaking, we'll call on you, and there will be an unmute notification that comes to you that you can then be able to speak, and then we'll put you back on mute after you offer your comment.
And just a quick reminder before we go to the roll call, it can be challenging to monitor hands from commissioners when they're raised to be able to provide comments or ask questions. So if I don't call on you, or if Zach and I don't see your hand, please do feel free to unmute yourself and chime in with your question or comment. In this format, it doesn't always put the person who just raised their hand up at the front, or at least it doesn't seem to when I'm tracking it. So I just wanted to flag that for commissioners to make sure you have access. And with that, I'll go ahead and first run down the voting members that are here with us today. And just when I call your name, just say here And so I'll start with Tom Reitman,
Yes, here.
Nora Apter.
Morning here.
Good morning. David Ford.
Yeah, good afternoon here.
Let me see who else might have joined. And then Mary Morelands representing David Anderson.
Good afternoon. Or yeah, afternoon.
And Commissioner Jackson.
Here, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good.
Let's go through the rest of the. And then over to the agency and other non-voting members. Director Benner.
I'm here, thanks.
Gabriella Goldfarb standing in for Rachel Banks.
Hi all, good day. Gabriella Goldfarb, Environmental Public Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin McConaughey standing in for Lee Felden, Director Felden.
Yeah, good afternoon, I'm here.
Director Bateman.
Present. Good afternoon, everyone.
And Garrett Martin standing in for Megan Decker.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Let me go see who I've missed. Commissioner Sheeran.
I'm here, thank you.
Excellent. Let me just go and see. Suzanne Carlson standing in for ODOT.
Here.
Commissioner Potowski.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome. Just making one more look across and as other people join, I will try and remember to ask them to sign in virtually, so to speak. I think I captured everyone. Is there anybody I missed? Okay. Thank you, everyone. With the roll call completed, excuse me, Judith Callens, who's representing ODA today. Thank you, Judith. So with that, are there any commission members who'd like to provide a brief update on some work that's pertinent to the commission?
Hey,
Okay.
Kathy, this
Yes.
is Janine. I'll just take the opportunity to flag for folks that the Oregon Department of Energy this week is hosting 2 open houses to inform the design of a grid resilience program that we are going to be receiving federal funds for soon this summer. And we've submitted an application to the U.S. Department of Energy for these funds, and now we are working to put the details on what the program will look like. So we have an open house in Western Oregon at our Salem office on Tuesday, and in not really in Eastern Oregon, Middle Oregon at Warm Springs on Wednesday, and there are virtual options for both. So I will put something in the chat for people to see in case you are interested in that topic and don't have that on your calendar.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Benner. Kristen Sheeran.
Yes, hi, Chair. I just thought I would report that I think since our last meeting as a commission, Portland General Electric filed its combined clean energy plan and integrated resource plan with the Oregon Public Utility Commission at the very end of March. We are now in an open public comment period and will be in a series of public comment periods over the next 6+ months as we continue to refine that analysis. It is our roadmap for how we not only meet our long-term energy and capacity needs for PGE's customers, but also how we do so with the emissions reduction requirements that were set forth in House Bill 2021.
Excellent. Thank you. Just looking to see if there are any other hands up. Don't see any. So with that, I think we can go to our, maybe just look at our overall agenda and then go to our first agenda item.
Oh, Kathy, Commissioner Reitman, I have my hand
right.
up.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Commissioner Reitman?
Yes, just a reminder that the Senate Bill 530, the Healthy Soils Bill, is still alive. I'm not sure if the legislature is still alive, but we would like to see that one continue its progress.
Yeah, I believe it's the Senate Bill 530 is the Natural and Working Lands Bill. And thank you for your engagement in advocating on behalf of that bill in your personal capacity, Commissioner Reitman. I appreciate that. I think there is also a Healthy Soils Bill, which is also still alive, but separate from the
Right, yeah.
Senate Bill 530. Gabriella.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McDonald. I just wanted to mention for folks that the 2021 session enacted the Healthy Homes Grant Program, and and providing $10 million, and then the 2022 legislature added another $5 million, so a total of $15 million. And many of the agencies on Global Warming Commission have been helping us with that. We're in rulemaking right now with the hope to be able to issue a notice of grant award at the end of the summer and be issuing grants by the end of the year. We see this as an important pathway to use state funds, which are flexible, to complement the resources that are coming in from the federal government and existing and new, to really both advance clean energy, healthy homes, and achieve housing retention goals. And so just wanted to flag that the rulemaking is open right now, and we're collecting, the rules themselves are going to be very generic to try to be adaptable to different situations. And most of the requirements that we issue will be in the request for grant proposals. That's how we're going to shape things. So we're doing a lot of capturing of issues that will be important to make these efforts roll out well. So if there are folks who want, I'll put in the chat a link to the rulemaking that has the remaining meetings. The meetings will be going into July. So if folks aren't aware of it, it's an opportunity to come and raise additional important ways that OHA should be informed as we roll these out.
That's great. All of those updates are really important parts of implementing the roadmap. So great to hear all of that work that's underway.
Great, thanks.
Okay, let me just make sure no one else wants to raise a hand. Okay. Then let's take a quick look at the agenda. Today, we're going to get a legislative update from Christy Split at Odo, and we're going to do a deeper dive at our next meeting after the legislature ends for the session. But today, wanted to just highlight and provide some information on context for how we see the rest of the legislature, some of the legislation that we're paying close attention to. But we'll do a deeper dive at our next meeting on what the overall results were. And then we'll hear a presentation from Colin McConaughey and Janine Director Benner on the climate pollution reduction proposal that the state developed to submit to EPA to secure funding, which is also going to be very helpful in taking next steps on kind of deepening and advancing a lot of the elements in the roadmap. We have done brief presentations on the natural and working lands work that's been happening kind of a little bit separately, but under the auspices of the commission. And we'll be hearing from Lisa Debrucare, Lisa Gaines, who's the director of INR, is also with us, or will be with us for the topic. What I wanted to have them do is kind of give a quick reminder of the process, but then identify some of the issues that are coming up as INR has been working on this, and as the advisory committee has engaged in the topic. Then the final agenda item for the commission is really the major agenda item for the commission is the starting to think about our work plan for the next biennium, some length of time that we end up being able to scope out, but hopefully for a good block of our work over the next 12 months to 18 months, perhaps. What we want to do today is just kind of tee up and get feedback from the commission on how we should be, the key elements of how to frame our work plan going forward, and hopefully be able to take that longer term view and schedule things out for ourselves, so we kind of know what's coming and can start to work with other agencies to line up presentations that we might want to have as part of that. And then we'll close with public comments. And as I said earlier, that'll happen around 12:30, and we'll keep track of how we're doing against that timeline and make sure to let folks know that when they need to let us know that they want to provide comments. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Christy Splitt with the Oregon Department of Energy to give us the legislative update.
Great, thank you. It's really nice to be here today, and I'm always grateful to have a chance to present to the commission. It's not every time that I'm coming in where I have a lot of information that's kind of unknown. There's a lot happening sort of behind the scenes right now, and I can tell you sort of what I know about where we are, and go over a couple of bills that we at this point anticipate likely passing and moving depending on what happens with the various other dynamics, bigger picture of the session. So I kind of want to start off by giving this disclaimer that, because it is a public meeting and it is kind of strange to be like, here's some things I think are going to happen. But I also feel like that's just sort of where we are right now. So I'm going to just give just the facts here's where we are with session, and tell a little bit about what I expect to happen next. And we'll dive into those bills. So the first thing that most civically engaged folks, like the folks on this call, are aware of is that we're about 2 weeks in to what's called a walkout, which has become a fairly common occurrence at the Oregon legislature. 2019, 2020, 2020, 2021, 2023 now. So these are not quite every time, but most times now it seems like this is something that comes up during the session. In this case, in the Senate, it's a walkout of 10 Senate Republicans who have prevented there from being quorum, which is the requirement of a certain number of folks at a meeting in order for the meeting to hold place. So just know that walkout is happening. And there was a ballot measure that passed that folks thought might stop the walkouts from happening, that makes it so you can't run for office again after you have 10 unexcused absences. And the 10 have all decided to cross that line and will not be able to run for office again, barring the results of a lawsuit that most conventional wisdom seems to think is likely to fall in favor of the ballot measure that passed, because the ballot measure already had to be legally tested to appear on the ballot. So we'll see what happens with that. But what it means right now is that this session has kind of developed the moniker of a zombie session. So as of last Thursday, there's really no expectation that the Senate will be able to function and have a quorum in order to hold floor sessions and move bills through the Senate's kind of final approval process. That means Senate bills get stuck in the Senate, can't go to the House for approval, and House bills can make it pretty far through the legislative process and then just kind of get stuck on the Senate door. And so the decision has been made to continue to hold committees as usual. Many of the 10 Republicans that haven't been coming to floor session have been coming to committee meetings. And so the committee process has been pretty unfazed, and bills are continuing to just sort of move through the zombie session thing here, kind of move through, even though nobody has an expectation at this point that any bills that haven't already passed through the Senate have a chance of passing. So there's some Senate bills that have already had Senate floor votes. Those can make it through committee on the House side or joint committee and proceed to the House floor and pass. So I haven't done that analysis of what bills have already kind of gone that route and can pass into law, but there's definitely, it won't be the 3 bills of the 2020 session. There'll be quite a few bills that will pass completely through the process, regardless of the Senate situation. So that's kind of the context on how the walkout is affecting the flow and what the session sort of feels like as far as things crossing, say, the finish line. What it doesn't really talk about is that zombie process that's ongoing, the committees that are still alive, and what's happening with those. And so the other big piece of news that's also very new, and again, just like the walkout, like kind of hard to talk about. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's a lot of conjecture. The Ways and Means process, that's where our budgets get set in the state of Oregon, and also where sort of bills with a budget impact pass through the process. There's a committee that checks price tags and then passes things through. And on Wednesday was the May revenue forecast. And every year there's periodic revenue forecasts to inform legislators of how the economy is faring generally and what impact that will have on the state budget. The May revenue forecast is special because it's actually the combination of a forecast, but also it's based on some very real, very up-to-date information, which is the information from people's state tax returns in April. And so using that information, they're able to say, okay, well, here's how much money we think you'll have to spend in the next biennium based on tax revenue. But because of the use of that April 15th, I guess it was April 17th this year, maybe, information from people's tax filings, it's like a pretty certain number. And so that's the number that the legislature uses to set the budget for the next 2 years. And for those who many of you probably already saw the news or know the news, but essentially there was a very unexpected increase in the revenue coming into state coffers this tax year, which then informs that number of how much money legislators sort of have to spend on state agency budgets and bills that will have a price impact. And it was actually in the magnitude of billions. It's an additional $1.8 billion above what the expectation was for the co-chair's budget, which is sort of the legislature's first drafted state budget. And the governor's recommended budget was a little higher than the co-chair's budget. But in the end, there's quite a bit of extra revenue to spend. So everyone was expecting perhaps a cuts budget environment or a very austere set of new programs. And so that got just turned on its head with this kind of pretty earth-shattering news for the legislature on Wednesday. No matter if the Senate never comes back and the session ends with nothing else happening that isn't already happening as I've described, that money will still be there, and there will still be almost certainly some sort of special session in order to set state budgets. A continuing resolution passes each legislative session as just like a way that general things happen in the Oregon legislature. They happen to already pass that continuing resolution. So state agency budgets will continue at current service level through mid-September. But you can expect if the session does indeed close down with nothing else happening in the Senate, no other bills crossing the Senate floor, there will almost certainly be a short or a special session over the summer to pass state budgets and deal with any other bills that the legislators and the governor together decide to take on in a special session. The governor calls the special session, and there's a sort of a co-convening role for the two presiding officers and the governor together. So that's sort of a note on sort of the money situation, that things that we kind of know or kind of big picture. What it means for the Global Warming Commission is actually pretty exciting. And I don't have all the details. Those details will be forthcoming as things move through the process. But I can say that a lot was happening late last week after that forecast came through. Janine sent a great article that Monica Samoya, who does great work at OPB, wrote up about sort of the climate budget and some dynamics, some desire from folks to, try to get everybody back to work in the Senate so that everybody can take advantage of this opportunity to quickly get these new and extra funds invested in various programs that are needed most for Oregonians. And climate certainly has, given the urgency and magnitude of the problem, a big place at that table with that additional revenue amount. And so I can't give you an exact dollar amount. As we go through the bills that we kind of pulled out as ones that we think are especially important to this commission, I think a week ago, we were thinking like 2 of them might not make it. One set of them might, given the sort of austere dynamic, but it is my expectation that the policy and funding pieces that we'll talk about with these bills are likely to happen. There are other climate related bills that are likely to move that we're not going to specifically talk about today. But I will say that I started getting some texts last week asking me if there was like going to be one climate bill. And it does sound like, based again, here's conjecture. It does sound like the plan is that there might be like one big bill with kind of a lot of different climate change related concepts put into it. It makes some sense if you think of it about it, that we're preparing for either sort of a rushed and short end to session if the Senate does reconvene, or a special session in the summer where fewer bills will make it possible to make that a shorter special session than if there was, every single bill had to move on its own accord. So there does seem to be this movement toward like one bill. And so, like I said, we don't know what's in it. I haven't seen it. I've heard some conversation about what might be in it. Honestly, I sort of encourage the commissioners that might know of things that are in it when I'm done talking to kind of share what they know if they would like. No pressure, but that's the best I can do right now because I haven't seen a list of what is likely to move based on that new updated revenue picture. Yeah, I think anything that seemed to have a lot of support from legislators and advocates that was people are worried about it from a funding perspective, that worry about funding is not so much the concern now. So I think that's good for a big picture update. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has them, and then we'll dive in on a couple of specific bills. So if you have any big picture questions, great. We'll talk about some specific bills, and then we could talk a little bit more with questions or comments if anyone has any.
Christy, that was a great overview of the big picture. Thank you. And I did want to also acknowledge Wendy Simmons and Zach's work on the updated memo that's posted in our on our meeting today, and encourage folks to go take a closer look at all the different bills that are happening. But I wanted to just thank Wendy and Zach for the great work on that, and acknowledge what a great overview you just did. So, any questions for Christy?
Yeah, and that May 4th report, it's actually like pretty up to date because not really too much has happened since then because of the dynamics happening in the big picture. Great, I don't see any hands. So I'll go ahead and move on to bills. And I think Zach goes first. He's going to give us an overview of two of the bills.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Christy. So commissioners, we've been talking a lot about SB 522, which is really focused on the Global Warming Commission itself, and many of the roadmap recommendations that we put together have found themselves into this bill. And so just wanted to refresh and remind the commission about the bill, and also give you some updates because it was amended as it went through. So the bill would update the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals to the roadmap recommended goals. There are some commission mandate additions, including requirement to do a detailed forecast of emissions and emission reductions, to track and evaluate progress towards the net zero and net negative emission goals, in addition to the greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. It expands the mandate to track and evaluate the carbon sequestration and potential of Oregon's forests to all national working lands. And then also includes one of the recommendations from the roadmap that had a periodic evaluation of the greenhouse gas goals based on the best available science, and includes that happens at a minimum within 18 months of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's synthesis report or the US National Climate Assessment. And then another big piece of the bill is to expand the commission membership. So it would move the number of members from 25 to 35. And 2 of the voting member additions are ones from the roadmap recommendations, youth member and environmental justice member. And then as part of the conversations during committees, a member of the fishing industry was added as a voting member. And then non-voting member additions would include a number of agencies, as you can see listed there. The other another piece that was recommended in the roadmap that is in the bill is to require regular agency reporting to the commission. The bill would also rename the Global Warming Commission to the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And then there is a requirement for DEQ in consultation with the Global Warming Commission, or if it's called the Oregon Climate Action Commission, to evaluate opportunities to address consumption-based emissions, which again was another roadmap-related recommendation. And then finally, changes the date of the biennial report submission from March 31 of odd numbered years to December 1st of even numbered years. So that's kind of the content of the bill. And then just to give you a little bit of a heads up on the fiscal resources associated with it, for the 2023 to 2025 biennium, there are 2 full-time positions and then $250,000 for a consultant to help with the forecast modeling. So again, those were some recommendations that are now in this particular bill, and given all the dynamics that Christy talked about, we'll see where that goes. And then I wanted to give an update also on the
And Zach, just
yeah.
to that bill as well as 530 are down in Ways and Means now.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue to 530. So 530 is very focused on natural working lands, and has a lot of work behind it in terms of informing the bill through all the work that the Global Warming Commission has done in the past on natural working lands. And so this bill would declare state policy to implement and incentivize strategies to advance natural climate solutions and improve understanding of natural climate solutions. And there are 2 big components to it. One is to develop carbon sequestration and storage data, as well as goals. So the Global Warming Commission, in consultation with a number of agencies, would be required to create a carbon sequestration inventory and metrics, and then update the inventory and provide biennial reports on it on an ongoing basis. The commission would also be asked to recommend non-binding carbon sequestration goals by January 1st of 2025, and then provide periodic updates on those goals. There's also a requirement to do a workforce study related to natural and working lands efforts and natural climate solutions. This was one of the recommendations also that was coming out of the natural and working lands work that the Global Warming Commission did. And then lots of agency consultation and coordination and public comment opportunities related to that. On the fiscal side, to do that work, there's included 2 full-time positions, $400,000 for a consultant to do the inventory and $250,000 for a consultant to help with developing the metrics and doing carbon accounting and the like. And then the other big piece of the bill, which still is a bit TBD, as there's no specific money attached in the bill to it, but it would create a National Working Lands Fund, which would be able to be used by certain agencies to incentivize natural climate solutions and also do some research on natural climate solutions related items. And so there would be the Global Warming Commission would actually determine the annual fund allocations to the agencies listed there. You see there are 4 to the Department of Agriculture, Department of Forestry, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Watershed Enhancement Board. And then there may be some rulemaking associated with that. And then the Global Warming Commission is required to do an annual report summarizing the fund use, and then a biennial report that's a bit more detailed on the fund projects and programs. And then lots of agency consultation and coordination and public comment opportunities. And as I mentioned, the fiscal resources are currently indeterminate on it because it kind of depends on whether and how much the fund is funded. And then the last piece is just Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee that the Commission can set up, and it has a number of folks listed and requires the Commission to do some outreach about the Commission and who should be on the Commission.
Yeah, just a couple of clarifications. On the Natural and Working Lands Fund, the intent is to have the agencies that are named work together to submit a proposal for consideration by the Global Warming Commission. And then, as Zach said, we would weigh in on the allocation, the specific allocation. So we want to work very closely with those agencies to make sure that the funds that we're providing are helping to best leverage federal resources and take advantage of existing state programs and the like. So that's kind of a little bit of how that would be developed. In terms of the folks on the advisory committee, you said folks, really it's kind of identifying expertise, which I think is what you meant, Zach, but just identifying the kind of areas of expertise that we would want to see on an advisory committee. We have an advisory committee now. We are doing some of the work that is outlined in the bill, the preliminary work on some of the work that's outlined in the bill. But there definitely is more needed as follow on to the current work of the temporary advisory committee and the work that the Institute for Natural Resources is leading on our behalf. And the last clarification, we did propose goals for carbon sequestration, but recognize that we needed to do some of the work that is in process now and anticipated by this bill, such as really identifying the metrics that we could track, setting a baseline. And so we kind of identified the need to update the goals based on a fuller understanding of what's the art of the possible or the science of the possible, as the case may be, in terms of how we do this work. And you'll hear more about this from Lisa later today. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks. So I might turn it back over to Christy to run through the buildings package.
Yeah, and I'm just going to do kind of a brief overview of this. The other 2 bills really kind of have a lot, like the Oregon Global Warming Commission is like very, very central to the work that's happening in those bills. They're directing the commission to do a lot, right? So they're like commission bills, if you will. This is a bill that is, this package of bills is significantly broader than that. So I'll just kind of go through it briefly just to give an idea. And I think we selected this one because so many folks have such an interest in reducing emissions from buildings. It relates so closely to the work that you all have been doing for the past couple of years with the roadmap, where a lot of this type of work is the kind of work that kind of comes to the top of the list for things that the state can do to reduce emissions. So essentially there's generally considered 4 bills, the last 4 on this list, that are part of that package, but there is a sidecar, as I like to call it, and it's one that directs the Department of Energy to do some work. So I listed it here first. That's House Bill 3166, and it actually directs our agency to establish 2 programs that are coming in from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act that have to do with home energy efficiency. One of them is a whole home whole home weatherization program. Sorry, I doubted myself for a second. And then the other one is a point of sale rebate program for a whole bunch of different sort of appliances or products in your home that you could purchase to reduce your energy use. And heat pumps is like kind of the top example, but there's actually a long list of different types of appliances or products that you could purchase and get a rebate back from this program. So it directs us to set up that program, and then, which we know we have to set up anyway, but we wanted to have a bill that gave us that instruction so that we could kind of start to get going on the work and not wait for the federal funding to come in. And the other piece of it is this one-stop shop idea. And that is the realization that there's a ton of different programs, like literally hundreds around the state, that can help with home energy efficiency. And how do we kind of come up with a place where you could find out about all of it versus having to go to each like individual place to try to find out about it. So we have some resources to sort of get started on creating something like that, which could be built out over time. So that's the first one. The next one is, I call it Heat Pumps Plus, but it's another heat pump related bill. This one actually overall on Inflation Reduction Act and Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act dollars, it gives agencies some direction on what to prioritize when it comes to energy efficiency and some sort of parameters for consideration, for example, including environmental justice in the planning for receiving and spending those federal funds. So there's some parameters there that are sort of more general, but then it also includes a heat pump goal for the state. And then it also includes reporting on progress toward that goal. And then it also includes the Department of Energy running a new program to help industry and workforce become educated about the various home energy efficiency or energy efficiency period options there are under federal funding. So that's another one. And then Senate Bill 869 has to do with making sure that our building codes are as up to date as they can be and as ensuring of energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions. I don't know that bill as well. So there's a few people on this call who know this package way better. So if anyone has questions on those, hopefully they can help me out on that one specifically. Senate Bill 870 is a big new program that would come to the Department of Energy as well for a building performance standard. That is over time, the idea that larger commercial buildings would essentially have to, with some carrots to help, bring their buildings up to being more efficient over time. And this is sort of a common approach that several other states are ahead of us in taking. And so we have good lessons to learn from other states and their experiences. Our policy closely mimics Washington since our economies are so intertwined. And we have a lot of the same, for example, owners of lots of commercial buildings across both borders. So, so that's the general gist shorthand of that one. Designed really to bring about increased efficiency in large, very large, mostly commercial structures. And then finally, 871 is designed to just make sure state buildings are efficient as they can be. And all within sort of a, the idea is like, how can we be more efficient, but not, do it at too much cost, but find a way to make sure we're taking advantage of all those opportunities for those energy savings. So I'll kind of leave it at that because I'm trying to be high level on this one and respectful of time for the agenda. But there are experts on this call that could tell you more, or you could reach out with any questions about them. We can't hear you, Kathy. I still can't hear you. Maybe it's just me.
I also can't hear.
Okay. If Kathy figures out her sound, I can just ask if there's any questions, any comments from anyone. Great.
Well, just
Oh, go ahead.
This is Commissioner Ford. Could you share a set of those slides with us? That would be, I think the summary, particularly of 530 and 522, were quite helpful, and as well as this one.
They're posted on the Global Warming Commission website, so I can grab that link and pop it in the chat when I'm done.
Thanks.
Thanks. So it looks like actually somebody already did that. So, Nora, thanks. Zach, do you want to maybe move us to the next agenda item while Kathy figures out her sound? Maybe it'll give time for Kathy to leave and come back maybe.
Thanks, Christy, for that update. That was really great. Really appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing.
Glad to be here. Sorry, it's all so nebulous. We'll have more by like September. All right, take care.
No worries. Thanks. All right. So I know the next thing on the agenda was to get an overview of the Oregon's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. And to help lead us off on that, Colin McConaughey from DEQ is going to help take us through. And I have some slides that I need to grab and switch screens. So if you can just give me about 30 seconds to do that, and then hopefully Kathy's audio will work, and then we'll get those slides up as well. So just hang on 1 second.
Thanks, Zach. And this is Colin McConaughey filling in for Director Felden at Department of Environmental Quality. And I believe Director Benner and perhaps others from ODO as well are here to join me in describing our nascent approach to EPA's climate pollution reduction grants. This is a portion of the Inflation Reduction Act, one of several pots of money that the IRA provided to EPA to dispense. And this one is focused on states, local governments, tribes, and territories to develop plans to reduce climate pollution within their jurisdictions, and then provide funding, more importantly, perhaps, to implement those plans. So I'll pause there. I think Zach's pulling up slides. There we go.
I think I am back. Can you hear me?
Yes, Kathy, I can hear you. Did you want to go back to the previous agenda item for a moment? And I'm happy to pause here and
yeah, I think we were wrapped up. I would say if people have specific questions for Christy, maybe go ahead and put them in the chat, or questions that others might be set up, and we'll see if we have extra time later in the meeting, just so we can get a little bit back on track on schedule.
And then I did just want to add, as you kick off, Colin, thanks for doing that while I was getting the slides up, that this grant is really provides a great opportunity to hopefully help move the roadmap recommendations forward. And so there is, you know, while this is going to be a new grant and new work, hopefully the roadmap recommendations and all the work that the commission did leading up to this will help inform the work ahead that Colin and Janine and others will talk about shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the state of Oregon, this Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, or CPRG for shorthand, is really building upon a lot of work we've already done in Oregon, in large part already done as a consequence of the Oregon Global Warming Commission and the for example, the roadmap to 2030. I think for many states, this fund represents a chance to develop from whole cloth new plans, plans that don't exist for them. But in Oregon, we have a lot of existing climate planning work to build upon and help see realized and funded through this program. And I think that puts us in a really exciting position here. And I'll talk more about that as we move along. But just by way of orientation here, the CPRG is a $5 billion pot of money that, again, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 provides to EPA to offer, quote, grants to states, local governments, tribes, and territories to develop and implement plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's not from the act itself. I believe that's from that's a descriptor from EPA in their interpretation of what they are directed to do with these funds. And the first thing that they have done is to peel off $250 million of that $5 billion to fund planning, CPRG plans from those entities I just mentioned, again, states, local governments, tribes, and territories. And then the remainder of that $5 billion is then to fund implementation of those plans. If we go to the next slide. Thanks, Zach. So how they've apportioned those planning funds, again, that $250 million is first for $3 million for each state that applies. This is non-competitive. My understanding is that I believe 46 states did end up applying for their $3 million allotment. Oregon, certainly one of them. And then as well as $1 million for large metropolitan statistical areas, of which there's only one in Oregon. That's the Portland, Hillsborough, Vancouver area. I think they chose the top 67 by population MSAs. And again, Portland's the only one that makes that cut. And then still, I think, to be determined amount of money for tribal governments. And my understanding is that a lot of this is being, I should say, is being implemented through EPA's regions. EPA, as a federal agency, has 10 different regions that implement a lot of regulations from headquarters. And we're in Region 10. And Region 10, which is, I believe, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska, happens to have a pretty extraordinarily high concentration of tribal governments. My understanding is that Region 10 is still working to negotiate the amount of the federal funds overall that are available for tribal governments that will be apportioned to Region 10 and the, again, considerable number of federally recognized tribes in the Northwest region in Alaska. Let's go to the next slide. Thanks, Zach. So jumping into the planning grants, again, each state gets $3 million. I'm focused here on the state planning grants. Again, there are other grants available for potentially up to each of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon, as well as what our understanding is that Metro plans to apply for the Portland, Hillsborough, Vancouver MSA $1 million grant. But so I'm focused here, talking here about Oregon statewide plan, CPRG planning. And here EPA has directed states primarily to develop 2 different deliverables. The first is a priority climate action plan, and the second is a comprehensive climate action plan. And I'll walk through a high level of the process here as shown on this slide, and then dive a bit more into what we plan and what we understand is intended for these priority climate action plans. And then I'll hand it over to Janine to talk in more depth about our plans, our work plan for the Oregon's comprehensive climate action plan. So just quickly here on process or timeline that EPA has laid out for those deliverables in this work. April 28th, a little less than a month ago, was the deadline for states to submit an application for CPRG planning funds. We did that on the deadline, as I understand it, again, 45 other states did as well. And then the first big milestone is the deliverable, the deadline for that first plan, the Priority Climate Action Plan. That is March 1st of next year. So less than a year from now is the deadline that EPA has charted. And I'll talk through a little bit more about our plans for delivering that a little bit early because of some other deadlines or timelines that EPA has indicated. But then moving to the next major deliverable, and that is, again, the so-called Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. That is due late summer, early fall of 2025. And then finally, EPA asks for a status report due at the end of this grant period, which is in the summer or into fall of 2027. Still unclear exactly what that status report, what's expected there. That obviously have some time to figure that out, for EPA to figure that out, and for them to communicate that with states. Our anticipation is that it is more a status report on the use of implementation funds and how how those have been expended or are being expended and results. But again, more information pending from EPA. We go to the next slide. Actually, I guess is, yeah, thanks, Zach. Wanting to overlay what are also what we understand, although this hasn't been officially announced, nailed down yet, but from EPA, they've indicated that they plan to solicit for applications, and these will be competitive, for implementation funds. Again, there was $5 billion for the CPRG overall in the Inflation Reduction Act, and about 4 3/4 of that $5 billion are earmarked for implementation grants. And those are, again, grants to implement actions identified. I'll explain more on the next slide, I believe, about this, but these are grants to implement measures that states identify in our priority climate action plans. And EPA has suggested that they, on or around early March, will issue their solicitation for applications for that $4 3/4 billion pot of CPRG implementation funds, and plan to close it as soon as 30 days thereafter, and have said that they intend to have that be the one-time window for applications for them to then award all of that $4.6 or $7 billion. So a very critical period, very critical and brief window for states and other entities to access those funds. And then let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk a bit more about the Priority Climate Action Plan. Thanks, Zach. So I already mentioned Oregon's and other states' Priority Climate Action Plans are intended to identify the measures, I think that's the phrase or word that EPA uses, the measures that are a priority to the states and other jurisdictions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't think I actually said that already. These are, the CPRG is intended to fund climate mitigation or greenhouse gas reduction measures. Our understanding is that resiliency or adaptation may be more available, more on the more possible for tribal governments to apply for, but less so for state and local jurisdictions, really prioritizing climate mitigation. Again, probably should set that up front. So looking at the timeline for the Priority Climate Action Plan, we see that funding, that $3 million to states, will be available beginning June 1st. We've already applied for it, but the funds can't actually be used and expended for work until June 1st. And then that really kicks off what we anticipate to be a pretty intense period over the summer and fall for us to engage with others, with state agencies, local governments, community organizations, and tribes to identify those measures to include in Oregon's Priority Climate Action Plan. And we're shooting for a draft of that Priority Climate Action Plan to be available for public review and comment late this year, sometime around November. And our hope is to publish this early. Recall I said EPA has said this is due to them March 1st. We'd like to get it out in near, if not completely final form at the beginning of next year, sometime in January, because if you recall, if you notice that the dates line up, they March 1st is the deadline for PCAPs to be submitted, but March 1st is also the timeline that EPA has indicated is on or around that time when they will open up that 30-day window. And that's a very brief amount of time for organizations to apply for implementation grants. And we'd like to give Oregon entities a head start, give folks more time to realize what within their wheelhouses is in Oregon's plan and potentially eligible to compete. Give them time to develop their applications to submit to EPA in that brief 30-day window early next year. And so this brings me then to where we're at here in Oregon and our approach here. Zach mentioned this earlier, and I just really want to emphasize what I think tremendous starting point we're at here in Oregon to develop our Priority Climate Action Plans. Really ambitious schedule, and I think most, if not most states don't have that firm footing that we have here in Oregon, thanks to the Global Warming Commission and your work, and chiefly to develop the recent Roadmap to 2030. We think that is the obvious starting point for us to look to at the state level anyway. What are the state priority climate actions that the commission has identified. And I would note that first and foremost among those, and as DEQ as the implementer of many existing climate mitigation programs, I greatly appreciate that first and foremost, the Global Warming Commission identified the need and the priority to fund and successfully implement our existing programs here in Oregon. And so I think I can say with some confidence that will be that we will look to those existing programs and their need for funding or benefit from funding to be some of those first and perhaps most obvious measures to include in Oregon's plan. And there are many other priorities identified in that roadmap, and we will be looking at all of them for any kind of relevance for federal funding. And by relevance, I really mean, is there any kind of nexus or benefit from receipt of federal funds for that particular measure? And if so, I think those are going to be that obvious starting point at the state level. And we also know that it's going to be very important for us to engage with local governments and communities and tribes across the state to identify specific measures for them. We want to have as many potentially eligible measures in our plan to compete for those funds. And a lot of organizations that are going to be the entities with relevance for application aren't necessarily state government. Putting aside, again, existing state programs, a lot of local fleets, for example, school districts and transit districts, applying potentially for funds for cleaner vehicles in their fleets. Those organizations are going to be extraordinarily important for us to engage with and identify measures, again, so that they can later than next year compete for that competitive funding. I think go to the next slide at this point. Janine, if you don't mind, I hand it over to you then to talk about that second deliverable I mentioned that EPA has identified, the state's comprehensive climate action plans.
Great, thanks, Colin, and huge kudos to Colin and his colleague Whitney for all of their work on this climate pollution reduction grant effort with EPA. And the Oregon Department of Energy is very pleased to be a partner in this work, and we sort of took on designing a high-level work plan for the comprehensive climate action plan, which is the second deliverable. It's not tied to specific funding like the priority climate action plan is. The EPA says it should touch on all significant greenhouse gas sources and sinks and sectors present in a state or metropolitan area, establish near and long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and provide strategies and identify measures to achieve those goals. So as both Zach and Colin said, we're already far ahead here in Oregon due to the work of the Global Warming Commission and others. And in putting together this work plan for this second piece, we really did, again, try to leverage existing work like the roadmap and tie this into existing work streams, acknowledging that we have a lot going on already. So some of this will sound familiar from the previous conversation on the legislative items that will affect our agencies and the Global Warming Commission. So the development of the Oregon Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or CCAP, is divided into 5 work streams. There's 4 here, but the 5th one is pulling it all together. So the first one is the development of a statewide energy strategy that identifies areas for improved alignment of energy policy, regulation, implementation, financial investment, and technical assistance to achieve decarbonizations. So for those existing programs that this commission has identified that we need to be successful in order to meet our goals, the energy strategy will really look at how the state can better align its work to make sure those are successful, to make sure we can get there and beyond. So specifically, the energy strategy will develop a robust understanding of the energy sector climate emission reduction planning efforts already underway, including through utility planning efforts, identify challenges to successful implementation of existing policies and programs like HB 2021 and the Climate Protection Program, and then look to leverage, identify where additional federal and state resources and actions can help support those. We'll be working with interested parties and the public also to sort of weigh the relative trade-offs of the different options to achieve these goals. A second work stream is a greenhouse gas emissions reduction policy gap analysis of sources and sectors. So this will look at the sources outside of the energy strategy, sources not currently addressed by existing climate policies, but also where existing policies may be insufficient to meet state targets. This will inform the development of policy options and considerations to address those sources. Third will be a natural and working lands carbon sequestration inventory. So this will start to sound familiar, but this inventory will inform carbon sequestration opportunities on state and natural working lands, including forests, grasslands, rangelands, farmlands, tidal and subtidal wetlands, and the parks and open spaces in urban environments. And this work stream will really take place in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture and Forestry, and Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and we'll be working to put together a biological carbon sequestration and storage inventory that looks at the total amount of carbon sequestered through biological processes and stored in Oregon's natural and working lands. Fourth, then, is a continuation of the community engagement that will take place under the Priority Climate Action Plan to really identify the barriers that are faced by Oregon's environmental justice communities to accessing and benefiting from clean energy projects and programs, and to identify the greenhouse gas mitigation measures that are of most interest and benefit to those communities. So this engagement and prioritization of environmental justice communities will also be critical to Oregon's implementation of many existing programs, particularly the community climate investments that DEQ is working on under the Climate Protection Program. And we anticipate that findings from this engagement can also be used to inform other state and local climate efforts as well. So finally, then, combining the output from these 4 work streams will comprise that final deliverable to create an action plan that addresses emissions across all sectors and sources and various levels of government. So this will involve, we acknowledge, a lot of interagency coordination and decision making. So we plan to be working with our sister agencies through the Governor's Natural Resource Cabinet and other venues. And then the application we submitted to US EPA really calls out the Oregon Global Warming Commission, which will be asking to provide advice and guidance throughout the development of the CCAP. The application highlights that the members of this commission represent a diversity of expertise and responsibilities across many of the sectors integral to the development of the CCAP. The work will also build on existing climate action plans and climate-focused policies and programs that many local Oregon governments have already developed or are in the process of developing. Also, of course, looking to work with local governments that don't have these explicit climate-focused plans or programs, and will be conducting outreach through existing partnerships. And then finally, each of these work streams will involve significant outreach and engagement, hopefully in alignment with outreach and engagement being done by state agencies and other entities that are implementing climate policies to make sure we don't overwhelm the folks that we're looking to work with. And sorry that took me so long, but that is our CCAP overview.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Benner and Colin, for your really thorough presentation on that. It's really gratifying to see all this work that's going to be picking up kind of where the commission was able to get, and deepening and expanding the way it can touch down in Oregon, and making that more explicit. So thank you very much. We are now just a little bit more behind than we were before. I'm going to suggest, given that this is a 3-hour meeting instead of a 4-hour meeting as we've been having for much of the last year, that we can maybe shave down our time for a break, and then possibly some of the work plan discussion time. So with that, I can't remember if we're going to a break now or if we're going to natural and working lands and then to a break.
natural working lands, and then a break.
Great, thanks, Zach. So if you, Lisa, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, or do you want to have Zach present?
I'll go ahead and share.
Okay, great. So Zach, if you can take yours down. And welcome, Lisa. Lisa is the primary contractor to INR, who's helping facilitate all of the great work that INR is doing, in particular, the work of the advisory committee that is helping us with this work. And she's going to give, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, an overview or a little bit of a reminder of the process, the deliverables, and then really kind of focus in on the some of the issues that have been coming up. The intent of this conversation is to start to provide that context for commission decisions that we'll be making in the fall once we get the report from INR and all the recommendations and input from our technical advisory committee and the advisory committee, stakeholder advisory committee. So with that, Lisa, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Kathy. And I think I can help get you guys back on track time-wise too, because I think this is a pretty concise presentation. So I am Lisa Debricare. I do work on contract for the Institute for Natural Resources at Oregon State University, where I've been working really closely with Lisa Gaines, the director. And I'll be sharing today's presentation on behalf of her as well. So I wanted just to give a brief reminder on the Natural Working Lands proposal and the 5 key deliverables and outcomes that we seek to achieve from that project, as well as the timeline, who's involved in their roles and responsibilities, the questions that we are seeking to address. And then really the biggest piece of this is just sharing with all of you the progress that has been made in achieving those 5 goals, and then our key next steps. So all of you are aware that there is an outcome-based goal for Oregon to sequester an additional 5 metric tons of carbon per year in Oregon's natural working lands and waters by 2030. And Director Benner described those 5 buckets of working lands for you, so I won't repeat them. But this goal is relative to a 2010 to 2019 activity-based baseline. And it's been important for us to remember throughout the process that it is separate from and in addition to Oregon's sector-based emissions reduction goals. And it's also important that we remind ourselves throughout the project that all of this will be periodically reevaluated as we better understand potential from the land sectors, have better science, and just move through the process. So in terms of goals and metrics, we are producing activity-based metrics. And we're producing community impact metrics. And the activity-based metrics are things like acres of X, where we can monitor changes in the landscape, which then convert to changes in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And the second piece is community impact metrics. And these are designed to evaluate benefits and burdens, or what we call the trade-offs associated with all of the different natural and working land strategies, practices, and programs. So we really want to understand what are ways communities in different geographies throughout the state of Oregon can measure the benefits and burdens that may be associated with any of these practices that are proposed on natural and working lands. So we did design a process. That was one of the first key things we did out of the gate when the project started. Lisa Gaines is the INR director. We also have a technical team, and I've listed their names below the big circle in this diagram. And as I mentioned, I've been facilitating the process. So we do have 5 key things that we needed to do. One was create an advisory committee. 2 is to develop these activity-based metrics and baselines. 3 was to identify community impact metrics. 4 was to define a scope of work for a statewide workforce and training analysis as it relates to natural and working lands. And the 5th was to develop a methodology for establishing an inventory of net sequestration. So what we did is we developed this advisory committee. All of you as the Oregon Global Warming Commission were integral to that process. And that advisory committee has been meeting with us, and I'll share with you the progress on that. In addition to that, we do have this team of state agency representatives that also serve in an agency advisory role. And then we've got these ad hoc technical work groups, teams of people that have been consulted through time to provide some input on some potential activity-based metrics. And so you can see in the far right-hand side are the 5 natural and working land buckets. And so then everything ultimately funnels into the Oregon Global Warming Commission at the end of this process. And our job is to perform that magic to get all of these groups thinking and talking about all of these 5 things, and that we feed it to the Oregon Global Warming Commission in a way that makes sense, in a way that you can use it to take your next steps. So as I mentioned, the activity-based metrics help us track the implementation of activities that will help contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases and the storage of carbon and sequestration of carbon in natural working lands. And then the second piece, which is the inventory, its purpose is to estimate carbon stocks and fluxes of greenhouse gases across those different land use categories. And most importantly, too, is to quantify the uncertainty around these estimates and then create some type of a tiered or dual proposal for greenhouse gas inventory. And I'll describe that in just a second. So to develop these metrics and a baseline for these activity-based metrics, we asked some questions. What recommended activities or practices could capture and store carbon and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon's natural and working lands? And which ones should be included in this effort? What methods can we use to develop a baseline? So how much is occurring? How much has happened in the past? How much would occur following a business as usual type of approach? And then the third question we asked is, how do we best measure or estimate the amount of carbon that is captured and stored if we actually do implement those activities? We want to make sure that our approach is consistent with IPCC guidelines and best practices, that it's informed by national and state approaches. So we've done quite a bit of background work looking at what other states have done, that it makes best use of the available science, that it acknowledges metrics and inventory methods that will likely improve through time, and that we arrange them by those land categories. And these Oregon-specific land use category definitions are being developed, and they're informed by IPCC. So the biggest piece of this presentation is really just sharing with you the progress that we have made since the project kicked off. We did form the advisory committee in late 2022, and so far a total of 8 meetings have been held. The individuals that participate in their respective affiliation and titles are on the right-hand portion of this slide. Each time the committee meets, we record the meeting. We post the meeting videos on the website, and I put a link to that website in the chat box before I started presenting. In addition to that, we list the attendees for each meeting, any chat box discussion, as well as agenda, or if there was a PowerPoint presentation, we list that as well. So any of the members, if they miss a meeting on the advisory committee, they can go back to the video and the work products and get caught up on where we are. Great group of people. Since it formed, we have formed 2 subcommittees. One is a forestry subcommittee. One is an agriculture subcommittee. They're comprised of a subset of individuals on the overall advisory committee that you see on this slide. And the reason we created those 2 subcommittees is we determined that particularly for those 2 sectors, because of the complexity and scope of what they're dealing with, the different types of agriculture, the different types of forest lands that exist in Oregon, that we needed a smaller working group to help navigate some of those issues and develop some recommended practices for the larger advisory committee to discuss before those recommendations go on to the Oregon Global Warming Commission. So like I said, a great group of people, really interactive, really participating in not only these monthly meetings, but in these numerous subcommittee meetings as well. in terms of the activity-based metrics and baseline, we ask that the commission thinks about it in 3 separate buckets. So our report is going to present those activity-based metrics to you from 3 different groups and then provide an overall summary of that information. And what I mean by that is the INR leads and one individual from TNC that connected with these technical individuals to develop this draft document on practices and metrics. They produced what we are calling a technical team document. So they recommended a series of practices and metrics. In addition to that, the advisory committee is looking at what the technical teams developed, and they are developing their own document, which provides their perspectives on practices and metrics for the state of Oregon. And in addition to that, Lisa and I have reached out to about 65 external reviewers nationally, with the abundance of them in the Pacific Northwest, but some key individuals on the East Coast who have been doing this kind of work for a considerable period of time. And we've asked them to provide written comments to what the technical teams produced, as well as Lisa and I have conducted numerous one-on-one conversations that we've recorded with these individuals as well. We're compiling all of that in a document. So what we hope to present to the Oregon Global Warming Commission at the end of the project, or toward the end, is this draft document that describes what the technical teams produced, gives you that flavor and layer and perspectives of what the advisory committees believe and think should be practices in Oregon, and then gives you the flavor and perspectives of external reviewers. We think that that rich presentation of information will give the Oregon Global Warming Commission what it needs to move forward with activity-based metrics for Oregon.
Lisa, just to also acknowledge ODA's leadership on the technical team as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that. So the third key deliverable for the project is community impact metrics. And so what we did is, instead of going straight to metrics, we thought about the framework for the state of Oregon and what type of framework the state could potentially adopt. And then from there, sort of the tendrils would lead down into community impact metrics as you think about all of the different types of communities that could be defined in the state of Oregon, whether those are geographically based, demographically based. We can define communities in a number of ways. And so we wanted this framework for Oregon to be as broad and representative as possible, but then allow for some of the local, more finite details to be able for a community to be able to use those more subtle local approaches. So thinking about the framework and developing that draft framework was actually the biggest part of this piece of the project. Once we developed that framework and we did an international literature review, looking at all the different types of frameworks that other countries, et cetera, have used, and then thought about it in terms of a state scale. So what we came up with is the framework and then a menu of opportunity that communities, however they describe themselves, could use. And so they've got this huge suite, it's hundreds literally of community impact socioeconomic metrics. And here's just an example of some in different buckets. So here's some example of education socioeconomic metrics. You know, things like the percentage of third graders that read at that grade level, or perhaps some food security based ones, like the percentage of population that is food insecure, or those that have equitable access to healthy options. And so by looking at all of these different buckets, a community, as they describe themselves, could pick and choose based on which of these buckets might be important to them. It might be a community in Corvallis, Oregon, that's really done a lot of work on sustainability like it's done in the past. So they might gravitate more towards some sustainability metrics. And there could be lots of other examples as well. So where we're...
Oh, go ahead, Lisa. Sorry to interrupt.
Where we are in the process is we've developed the draft framework. We've developed the draft menu of opportunity metrics, and the advisory committee is now looking at all of this, and they're coming up with a smaller list, a subset of these that they think would fit the majority of Oregon communities. And so it's an interesting exercise to think what all of these stakeholders or all of these advisory committee members that represent a broad geography in Oregon, how they might think of a smaller bucket of these for all of Oregon. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Lisa has kind of been emphasizing the way communities might use this broader framework to drive, sustainability and other programs too, which I think will be a really good resource for communities. The main intent in the Natural and Working Lands proposal was to develop these community impact metrics to help inform how agencies at the state level, local communities, municipalities would design programs and track the pros, how programs are doing towards a set of goals. So that's and specific to mitigation. So that's the primary, but I think that INR really has done above and beyond to kind of assemble all of this information that can provide really helpful information to communities on a broader set of ways of thinking about setting community impact metrics.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kathy. And you could see as you look through a number of these examples, many of the state agencies can definitely consider some of these for their programmatic look at things as well. So it definitely has a multiple purpose. And for some reason, I always forget that agency piece of it. I'm not sure why, but it's definitely applicable to both. So thank you for reminding me again. The fourth deliverable for the project is the workforce development and training needs assessment and gap analysis of natural and working land sectors in Oregon. This was a really cool piece of the project because it allowed us to look at workforce development and training needs assessments all over the country and a couple in Canada, and pick and choose what we thought were the best pieces of those, and then draft an assessment and gap analysis scope of work for Oregon. And then what we did is we went out to a bunch of experts in Oregon that deal in workforce development. And we had focus groups, one-on-one conversations. We had back and forth with our draft scope of work. And we created what we think is a pretty rich scope of work for the state of Oregon to put this out there and have someone describe how much it would cost to do this across these different land sectors for the state of Oregon. And Kathy, I'll punt this piece to you to describe where we are in the process.
And I'm going to punt it to Zach for him to describe that. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very close to publishing the request for information. And again, this would just be a request for information, not a request for proposals, to try to help get information to further refine the scope of work and also get a sense, as Lisa was saying, of how much it would cost. And there is some overlap with Senate Bill 530 that we talked about earlier in the meeting, that there may be some resources coming to be able to do the work that's outlined in the scope of work. And so there's a lot more to move on, but when this request for information is published, it will likely be out there for about 6 weeks. Folks will have an opportunity to ask questions and then be able to provide some information on the questions that are in the request for information. And then again, Lisa and her team and the advisory committee and others will work on refining things.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks for all your work in helping us get that out the door. And one of the coolest things we thought about this piece of the project is when we had these one-on-one conversations with workforce development folks around the state, they were so progressive in their thinking about how this could be done for the state of Oregon in a way that's not been done in Oregon before, in terms of creating efficiencies, filling gaps, not creating, a new program, but taking the best of what Oregon has in current programs, filling any gaps, and just in doing this in a way that Oregon hasn't seen before. So we're pretty excited about some of the language that they helped use in the design of this proposal. It'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next steps. And then the last piece of this is the natural and working lands inventory. So the goal of this is to create proposals for a greenhouse gas inventory, again, consistent with the IPCC framework. And so the way we're thinking about it is having a basic one and having a more advanced one. So the basic one, has some of the more basic elements, and the advanced one takes it sort of to the next level. So the questions we're asking are, what are the recommended methods to determine the current carbon stocks in net sequestration? How do these stocks emissions in sequestration change through time? What are the causes of these changes, and how do we track those differences? So where are we at on this one? We've got a background and objectives for the inventory. We have identified greenhouse gas inventory definitions. And this is really a key piece to this project, and it would be for any state that does something like this. You have to develop common language and get informed consent on that language, or else you end up with a mess on the other end. And so after we got draft inventory definitions, we worked really closely with the advisory committee. They added tremendous value to those definitions, and we finalized those with the technical teams with the work that the advisory committee did. And then now the drafts of the basic and the advanced methodology have been developed. The next step is going to be for the state and federal agencies to review, and then we'll share those with the advisory committee. So one of the key things that Kathy and I talked about prior to today's presentation is, and this is the last slide, is just to share with you some issues associated with this project, just to give you a feel for kind of how the project has gone and how things are going. So in terms of the advisory committee, the goal was to create a committee representative of the diversity of Oregonians. As an Oregon Global Warming Commission, you did a really good job of that. Put out a couple of calls for people in different parts of the state representing different demographies to participate in that. One of the issues we ran up against probably a third of the way through the project to date is integrating tribal perspectives in this statewide process. And it is because of the government to government relationship that tribal sovereign nations have with the state of Oregon. That was difficult to incorporate to date. From our perspective and level on this process, there was only one individual at the start of the project that was representing one element of a tribe. And as a consultant to that tribe and not a tribal individual themselves, they were not comfortable in terms of representing tribes and didn't feel that that was an appropriate function for the advisory committee. So at some point, the Oregon Global Warming Commission is going to need to engage at the state level with the tribes on that process. But one of the things that we've struggled with a little bit throughout the process is the confounding of political and policy processes with our task, which is science-based. So what INR and what we're working on, it's all science-based. We're looking at science, peer-reviewed publications, the best data, the best information. But while that's been going on, there's been a legislature in process. There's been, there's all kinds of discussion about how do we incentivize this? How do we do this? And that's outside of our scope. So we've decided to resolve that by welcoming, if someone's got a policy statement they think is really important on the advisory committee, no problem. We've got a separate document where we're capturing those policy statements, and we're just going to package them as such for the Oregon Global Warming Commission at the conclusion of the project. So we won't lose those good perspectives, but we also want the Global Warming Commission to recognize our work is science-based. It is not policy or political based. The second task that we're working on, the activity-based metrics and baseline, the prospective funding that could be associated with specific industries, whether it's the timber industry or ag industry or whatever type of industry, that can tend to try to confound our process as well, because it could make the process be something more than what it is. And right now we're on a science-based mission here to get you good information. So we just wanted you to know we're trying to keep those separate as well. Any potential funding for anything doesn't influence how we portray that science to you. The Oregon Global Warming Commission proposal goes to measure carbon and greenhouse gases relative to different scales and activities on the ground. So we just want you to know this accordion scale that we're dealing with. It's a challenge to think about, the work of a small woodland landowner versus state forests and their significant acreage versus, there's all these different kinds of scales and activities across these land sectors. And it's been a challenge. Emerging science and existing unknowns, it's always going to be a challenge for Oregon. It's going to be a challenge for any state that does this. And we just need to acknowledge that up front. And this is a really interesting one. It's really important that the commission knows that land sector industries in Oregon want to be recognized for their contributions, big or small, to carbon storage and greenhouse gas emissions goals. So we may be able to identify, let's just say, 5 or 6 really big things that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions and store carbon. That's great, and we want to do that. But let's acknowledge all of those other contributions, big or small, that these industries and folks that work in these sectors want to be recognized for, because they do contribute. Even in some small way, they're additive. And the last piece is just acknowledging the crossover in sector-based emissions in agriculture. So DEQ has its role, and they've got an agriculture sector, and we're working on agriculture in the natural and working lands piece. And so we've had some good conversations with DEQ about, hey, just recognize there might be a little bit of overlap here. And DEQ has been great about that. In fact, they've encouraged, if the ag sector or any other sector wants to suggest any practices that might overlap with some that are already in the ag transportation sector or whatever, they're fine with that. In terms of community-based metrics, just wanted to emphasize understanding and developing a framework for Oregon is going to be important for agencies and communities versus just specific metrics. Thinking about scale, again, that accordion for considering impact metrics. And thinking about metrics for different purposes, like the urban forestry program versus maybe the city of Portland urban forestry program versus a local community. It's really important because those metrics are important for all 3 of those different types of entities. And again, it's that accordion effect. In terms of workforce development and training needs, it's really important that all land sectors are represented in that assessment and gap analysis, because it can be really easy to overlook any one of those sectors just because of the size and history of some of our other natural and working land sectors. But if we really want to make a difference in workforce development, with the proposal that the Global Warming Commission developed, all land sectors have to be represented. We just need to acknowledge that the data and the information might not exist at the same levels across those sectors. Ensuring a new program is not created, rather creating efficiencies across all existing programs, and I mentioned that in my earlier statements. We have some people with a lot of horsepower in workforce development in this state, and they're pretty excited to see the potential for what can happen with Oregon's natural and working land sectors. And lastly, the inventory methodology. We do lack a lot of data and information. That methodology is going to evolve over time. We fully expect it to. It's not going to be perfect coming out of the gate, and we just need to acknowledge that. The scale of data is not the best that we want it to be, but it will get better through time. And there are privacy issues with private lands, and we all need to acknowledge that. The good news is that there's numerous programs that exist nationally and internationally where we address those private issues privacy issues on private lands. So there's lots of models to deal with that issue. And lastly, there's going to be a lot of assumptions with the inventory methodology because it's such an emerging type of issue for our state and numerous other states to address. In acknowledging those assumptions and then using an adaptive management approach where you modify and do course corrections over time are really going to be the key to success. So I have run out of air, and that is all of all that I had to present. And Kathy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Great job. I would like to maybe just take one or two clarifying questions if anybody has it before we go to break. And then the other piece just on the last section that Lisa covered in terms of the somebody is typing. So if somebody could go on mute that's typing, that'd be great. But the inventory information, one of the things that DEQ has shared with me, which makes me feel a little bit better about the fact that we don't have all the data that we would like, is that, that's been true of all the sectors that we've developed inventories. They've started where in the best place they could, and the information's gotten better over time. And so I think we will be following along on that same model. Commissioner Ford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McDonald. And Lisa, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. I just have a quick question on the second to last slide that you were talking about definitions, related to the inventory data. And I'm just curious. We're not the only state that's looking at inventory. I know California and Washington in particular have been looking at these issues. And I'm wondering, did the work group that's working on this look to see if we could create some consistency about these definitions so data can be looked at in the context of what's going on around us?
Yes, absolutely. And those definitions are posted on the website. So we started with California in their greenhouse gas inventory glossary. We wanted to use a state closest to us just as a starting point, and one who had already used IPCC and other definitions. So our definitions build off of California's, some modifications, but not any that would be considered hugely significant. If anything, there's just some additional terms that were added that folks in Oregon felt were important.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I think that's great, and I think clearly needed that we have some consistency so we can compare data sets and roll data sets up, really looking not just at Oregon, but looking at our region more broadly. So I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
There definitely was some interest amongst our advisory committee to refine definitions, but I think overall the committee felt like we should stay as consistent as we felt we could with definitions used by IPCC, California, and other states. So really good point. Other clarifying questions? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Director Bateman.
Thank you. Thank you for both presentations this morning. I just wanted to note our ongoing interest from DLCD, particularly as the land use approach that we take is really table setting, that it provides the backdrop and the context for a lot of these conversations. And we're particularly interested in being part of the natural working lands discussion wherever possible, helping to set that baseline and making sure that our coastal program that we're responsible for implementing is fully at the table there. So I just wanted to throw that reminder out and offer our help wherever we can in that piece. But we're very excited about both this and the previous conversation, just in terms of how Oregon is positioned. You know, we've got the Oregon Way, so we've got that basis and that history of connection with our communities, and then we've got our land use system that's you know, really well positioned to provide kind of the underpinnings for a lot of these conversations. So wherever we can plug in, please let us know. We're available and interested. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Bateman. And DLCD was very helpful in the development of the Natural and Working Lands proposal that we adopted in 2021, and has been providing some really helpful input, in particular on the coastal work, but also, you know, on how the land use laws benefit working lands in farms and forests and natural land. So really important part of that. Thank you. Other questions or comments? And I'm going to suggest we take a 11-minute break and try and reconvene it at 2, and we'll go on to our next topic. So Lisa, great job on getting us caught up a little bit, and then we can pick up our work planning topic when we get back together. Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner Jackson, so that I know that folks are back, and Commissioner Ford, as if others could do the same. Great. Looks like we have a pretty good group of commissioners that are back on. Give it the rest of the 2 o'clock minute, then we'll get started again. Great, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Zach to help us walk through some of the things we need to be thinking about relative to developing out a work plan for the next year plus. And you know, as I said at the top of the meeting, this discussion is really intended to kind of list out some of the bigger types of work the commission needs to take on, and make sure that we're not missing any pieces. Also find out, you know, kind of how the commissioners react to a defined set of questions, which Zach will share with you at the top of the meeting, and then we'll come back to them at the end. We are going to stop along the way and do clarifying questions as he walks through some of the different areas that should be informing, from our perspective, should be informing our work planning. And then the intent would be to bring back a work plan to our next meeting, which we anticipate having mid-July, and to be able to post that draft work plan with enough time so that the public can provide comments on the work plan, identify, you know, any things we may have missed. As I mentioned, we're having public input at the end of our meeting, and so certainly also welcome any thoughts on the work plan, as well as anything else during the public comment period that will follow this agenda item. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach.
Thanks, Chair McDonald, and looking forward to this discussion, and definitely want to leave time for discussion. So I might skip over a slide or two on the legislative stuff, since we spent a fair amount of time digging into some of the bills that may have some more work for the commission. But just to give you a sense of what I was hoping to cover here is just to offer a refresher on the Global Warming Commission's mandate, talk a little bit about the known Global Warming Commission work and deliverables through 2024, and then potential additional work deliverables. A lot of that is based on pending legislation. And then there are a number of policy topic focus areas that even before I came on board last summer that the commission was talking about, and there's a lot of work on the roadmap. And so wanted to bring those policy topic focus areas back up to see if there's any, if those are still of interest and or if there are more. And then talk a little bit about resource considerations as we think about how to do this work plan through 2024, and then open it up for discussion with questions and the like. So just to give you a heads up of some of the questions for discussion that are coming. As Chair McDonald said, we definitely want to know, are we missing anything? The other thing we were thinking about is how much flexibility should we build in for items or issues that may emerge? We may already have a full plate with what we're already talking about, but the guess is that there's probably more coming. And then are there items the commission would like to prioritize? And then is there interest in commission subcommittees maybe to help facilitate the work where commissioners can dig in? We had some success with that in some of the roadmap work and could carry that on. And then if there are just, you know, other ideas or considerations we should be thinking about, this is really the start of the conversation with the commission on the work plan. So just an overview of the current Global Warming Commission mandate, and I put all of the ORS citations at the bottom that are key ones related to this, if you want to dig in further on them. But, you know, generally the commission tracks and evaluates climate change issues and policies, programs, and progress towards the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. And then the commission offers a number of recommendations on a number of items, including helping to coordinate on state and local efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as recommending efforts to help Oregon prepare for the effects of global warming, so also on the adaptation side. And then there's a big chunk of work on educating Oregonians about the scientific aspects and economic impacts of global warming, and on ways to reduce emissions and prepare for the effects of global warming. And then, of course, we have the mandated biennial report to the legislature that describes progress towards achievement of the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals, and then can include a number of other items that the commission may want to look at. And so didn't want to spend a lot of time digging into the mandate here, but just to give you a reminder, refresher flavor of what's on our plate, and to say that there may be more coming with the legislation that we talked about earlier in the meeting. So what we know now about the work ahead of us through 2024, we know that we'll have the biennial report and put in there ideally by December 2024, because right now in our current statute, we don't have to deliver it till March 1st of 2025. But I think the goal has generally always been to deliver it in the even numbered year in December, right before the long legislative session. And I think we'd like to be able to do that moving forward. And if SB 522 passes, that would actually be the requirement by December 1st of 2024. And then all of the work that the commission did over the last year and a half, 2 years on the roadmap, we were assuming that the commission would want to continue to try to track and do some oversight on that. And that can include tracking what happens in the legislative session to see what recommendations were adopted and moved forward. And then also what needs to be done. Some of the stuff we talked about with the climate pollution reduction grant, planning grant may come in and moving forward some of the recommendations. And there may be more that needs to be done to catch recommendations that aren't fully covered by some of those other avenues. And then Lisa gave a great update on where the Natural Working Lands work is and some of the current grant deliverables that we'll be working on through the fall. And then there'll be some deliberation on some of the grant report recommendations that come out. And then probably the last big chunk that we had identified as known work is the climate pollution reduction grant work and advising on that. And in particular, with a priority climate action plan coming up pretty quickly, Colin mentioned the interest in having a draft by mid-November of this year and then potentially finalizing it by the end of January of next year. So there will likely be a fair amount of work for the commission to help advise on that. And then looking a little bit more forward after that, the comprehensive climate action plan portion with the 4 components that Director Benner walked through. There are 2 particular components, the gap analysis on existing policies related to greenhouse gas reductions and the natural working lands carbon sequestration inventory that we thought would likely require particular global warming commission focus, just given the historical work of the Global Warming Commission, as well as all the work that's been done on natural working lands. And definitely want to just note that we didn't get to have questions or comments on the climate pollution reduction grant portion earlier to try to save time. So when we do get to the discussion portion, would love to be able to maybe start with anything that anyone wanted to talk about there, and then have the broader discussion about the rest of the work plan. So then there's all potentially a lot of additional work that comes through, and I won't spend as much time on these legislative slides because we already talked through a lot of it, but this was just an effort to try to take what the bill says and what we would need to do through 2024 to make it happen. So the last bullet is the one that is kind of up to the commission in terms of when it thinks an evaluation report needs to be done on the goals based on the best available science. There is a minimum threshold, but the commission also has the ability to provide a report as needed. So that's why that one is in italics. The rest are things that we would very much, we would be required to do, and then also might need to have some conversations around, in particular, the 4th bullet, the discussion of regular agency reporting and review of reports. That's something that came up in the roadmap and wasn't fully defined, and might need some more conversation with the commission about frequency and what the structure is, obviously leveraging existing reporting that the agencies are doing and not trying to reinvent the wheel there. And then a big bucket of work potentially coming with SB 530. Again, we walked through these earlier, so I'm not going to go through each component of them, but there's things that will require consultants to help with, and then there are reports that we're required to do, potentially rulemakings, determinations around funding allocations, and of course, continuing to support and helping appoint a Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee. So taking all of that, there's a lot of work to do, just potentially in what we have in statute, and then, or what may be coming in statute. And then there are these policy topic focus areas that I've heard through Chair McDonald and others that folks wanted to dive into. One is climate impacts, covering some of the most recent science that has come out around climate change, and then also the work of the Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council, which has been very involved and doing great work on mitigation and adaptation efforts. Another bucket that folks have expressed interest in is energy planning, generally energy decarbonization planning, the state energy strategy that Director Benner mentioned during the conversation on the climate pollution reduction grant work. And then all of the integrated resource plans and clean energy plans that are coming out around HB 2021 and the overlap with those with the climate protection program implementation to round out that topic area. somewhat related was interest in talking about renewable energy siting. The ORISA project that the Department of Energy did has been done, but there was interest in getting a report and a showcase of some of the technical abilities that project provides for folks who are interested in renewable energy siting, talking about transmission, and then also the natural working lands interface with renewable energy siting. And then there's particular interest in transportation sector emissions and strategies. So talking about progress on the statewide transportation strategy and the transportation emissions dashboard that ODOT and a number of other agencies worked together on that came out earlier this year, and talking a little bit more about the Every Mile Counts work that has been done through the multi-agency partnership there. Then the last two that we had, one was talking about the building sector emissions and strategies. We heard earlier today about the buildings, the legislative buildings package that may be coming, and there's just hasn't been as much attention on building sector emissions and strategies at this level, and so there's interest in continuing that, to have that conversation and to be able to dig into it a little bit more. There are a number of recommendations in the roadmap related to buildings related items as well that could benefit from having more conversation with the commission. And the last one, but certainly not least, is equity. The commission was really strong during the roadmap conversation around wanting to understand the equitable benefits and impacts of climate actions and to explore those a little bit more. And there's efforts underway at the state agency level to develop an environmental justice mapping tool. So there's a lot to be able to discuss and dig in on there more. And then, of course, there's probably many other topics that folks are interested in. So just put that bullet there to say that this is not an exhaustive list at all, and we can add and subtract and prioritize as needed. So I'm just gonna end here with some resource considerations to tee up then the discussion, which is we're potentially looking, so right now, we're currently staffed with 0.3 FTE. There's a potential for 4 new full-time positions related to the work that we talked about in the legislative side. And so staffing is a question about, how much staff we'll end up with, which then plays into how much we can do or not moving forward, or how we need to prioritize. There's also a number of contracting needs related to the forecast of emissions and some of the natural working lands related items. And again, some of that is dependent upon how the legislative session shakes out. And then if SB 522 passes, the commission may be expanding. And so there may be there'll probably be some onboarding and need to integrate folks into the work, and also potentially provide some room for new priorities from the voices that are coming into the commission. And so those are kind of big picture things that would affect our ability to carry out the work and to what scope and scale we can do the work. So just planting that seed, and there may also be other considerations which we would love to hear from you all. So with that, would love to open it up to discussion. These are the questions that we thought of, but there's probably others, and maybe just before diving in, if there's something that folks wanted to connect on about the climate pollution reduction grants, just because we didn't have a chance to field questions on that.
Well, Zach, maybe first step, I forgot to call for any clarifying questions. Maybe just ask for clarifying questions from what Zach just presented, if folks have questions from that presentation. And then I think we can go and see if there are questions on the grant. Any clarifying questions? And again, if
I
you've
might
got your
have-
hand up, go
I have
ahead
one,
and,
Chair.
oh, there we go. Commissioner Sheeran.
Yeah, sure. So Zach, you had a very long list of topics of potential interest to the commission. I mean, some of those are topics that, I could see the commission digging in on, maybe producing recommendations, work, research, work of subcommittees. Others, sound more like this would be a good agenda item to have the right people or, organizations come in and present on. Is there a way in the discussion we can sort of distinguish between the two? Because obviously the resource needs and everything are going to vary widely, considering.
That's a great point, Commissioner Sheeran, and something that I think we should give more thought to as we build out a draft for review. And then as I was looking at this list, I think we don't want to necessarily duplicate, although there might be times when duplication would make sense, but we don't want to duplicate decision making and recommendation development that would be happening in other parts of state government. For example, thinking through the IRP that are submitted, but more maybe a focus on the topic of are there lessons learned that we would want to think about as we develop maybe complementary recommendations, if that makes sense. But I'm not sure we've thought enough about it yet, and I'm getting an echo. But Zach, if you want to add to that, please do.
No, I think that's great and a good point, Commissioner Sheeran. Thanks, and I think to the extent folks want to weigh in on how to balance that now, and would be great, and we can also give some more thought to it too.
Well, since I started the thread, and I think the chair was sort of heading there. I mean, there are some of these for which there could potentially be duplication of efforts. So for example, the IRPs and the CEPs, clearly that authority rests with the Oregon Public Utility Commission. Very extensive processes, guidelines, and rules in place, and so that would be a great example of one where it's like, having utilities come in and present on that work and explain it, and for informational purposes would be great, but certainly not replicating the work through the Global Warming Commission or creating parallel processes that would be confusing for stakeholders, because there's already a process in place where those stakeholders are intended to participate to effectuate the outcomes of the IRP and the Clean Energy Plan.
Yeah, really great point. In my mind, would be, honoring kind of that first recommendation in the roadmap, which is how can we make sure the policies and programs that are already in place are operating as well as they can, and, gathering any lessons learned through those other processes that might inform how we educate folks, or might inform, as I said, kind of complementary recommendations, I think would be the way I'd want to see that focus. Other, Director Bateman.
Thank you. On that note, I think related, I would hate for the work of the interagency work that was completed recently to get lost in translation. So we have the climate change adaptation framework, which is, not only a response to climate changes, but also, feeds back in and helps with mitigation as well, when it's seen all the way through. And we have, more than a dozen, I think it's 18 or maybe 21 state agencies that worked on this together. And has a really nice series of recommendations in it. So maybe featuring that or presentation on what's in there might be helpful as well. But I think it goes to not duplicating effort and making sure that we've gone back and picked up some really good ideas that are already on the table.
My cat has joined the meeting. I'm sorry. You know, one of the discussions that's come up from time to time from that staff, interagency staff group is, you know, is the Global Warming Commission a place to kind of hear that integrated and identify needs? And because there might not be one other one-stop shop to kind of do that. But I think it'd be great to better understand what would be value added to that really important interagency work that the commission could provide. And so maybe that's a question that we could ask as we go through the development of the draft proposal. Or work plan.
And we could either talk about it generically and look at the broad set of recommendations, or we could even come through the door of one very specific implementation piece, which is the climate change social vulnerability assessment that we're doing right now, and speaking specifically with local communities on what they're seeing on the ground. And so that might be another way to hear a little bit more about that project.
Absolutely. Great point. Gabriella?
Yeah, thanks, Chair McDonald. And what I want to say dovetails very well with what Director Bateman was just flagging. And I don't know if I hate to dilute a focus on equity by itself, but there's a lot of overlap between health, livability, and equity, and how tying back to the one line in the Global Warming Commission statute about recommendations about the effect of climate change on people in Oregon. You know, how do we have as a focal point things that tie into many of the other topics here, certainly for the CPRG, for the climate pollution reduction grants. There's a point that I wanted to flag. I don't think you mentioned it, Colin, that it is very strictly focused only on mitigation. It explicitly prohibits a focus on adaptation, but as you know, Director Bateman was saying, a lot of active actions that are about mitigating greenhouse gases also really help with adaptation and with building resilience in our communities. And so how do we, in that context, in the context of implementing the framework, the adaptation framework, and also in the work that was flagged in the Commission's report about kind of phase 2 of the recognition that there needed to be more analysis and data collection to be able to better analyze the co-benefits, the health co-benefits of mitigation investments. There's a whole kind of connected set of strands from all this work that boils down to what is it doing for the state, for people in Oregon? How does it connect with investments that our legislature is having to make, especially if it reduces expenditures, health expenditures or other expenditures? So I don't know how to capture that the best. And it really ties to equity, right? So equity is certainly, the environmental justice mapping tool is great, but there's a broader equity, health, livability portfolio there that is a good lens to look at many of these elements. So that isn't a very coherent, crisp item, but I just wanted to see if the great brains on the team there at Odo could come up with something that would be a good vehicle for the commission going forward to keep a lens on that and lift those issues, because it's where it really connects to what people in Oregon feel and experience.
Absolutely, really good point, and does pick up that thread that we talked at length about in a subcommittee when we were thinking about how these different recommendations and programs we were thinking about might provide, how we might design them to make sure that they're equitable and enhance the livability of all Oregonians. Commissioner Apter?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just first want to just really appreciate that we're having this conversation now, and commend you and Zach for laying this all out and just having a clear starting point for us to think through in terms of how we'll work together and focus in the coming months. I definitely agree with, in particular, using the roadmap as kind of a guiding post in terms of how we're thinking about considering these different policy areas, right? We already have that laid out. So when we're thinking about updates and tracking and hearing, getting information from agencies and other entities as processes move forward in parallel, I think, the roadmap that you all already put so much time into makes a lot of sense to work from as a guidepost for prioritization. I do certainly agree with Commissioner Sheeran that we don't want to duplicate efforts or confuse existing processes, but I think especially reflecting on, the role of the commission in the years coming out of EO 2004 and just making sure that we have a place for for information sharing and coordination. I think we all recognize that's going to be all the more important in the implementation phase coming out of all the progress the last 2 years. So I think continuing to think broadly, and in particular, appreciate what Gabriella just brought up, how we can use this as a place to maybe not get additional, input, not confusing processes, but at least have that information sharing as another place for stakeholders and decision makers to know what's going on in a number of different areas around the state related to climate and policy implementation. I think the one piece that came to mind that I'm not seeing or I don't think explicitly heard that's related to that coordination that will be really important is the federal funding conversation. We know there's so many opportunities, new grant opportunities being announced every day. That's, both at the state level, competitive grants, but also related to funding, tribal funding opportunities, communities, local government. I think that's also really important to our continued EJ and community engagement, but also just, again, thinking about how do we get that information out there and really coordinate and identify what seems, what should be a priority for the state to be going after, or otherwise this could be a venue over the coming months to just keep track and strategize together on that federal funding piece.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Apter. We've kind of blended clarification with thoughts on how we go forward, what's missing, how to best approach it. Does anybody want to go back to any of the other preliminary slides or any other thoughts that can come up with the discussion questions? Commissioner Ford.
Yeah, thank you. Just one quick comment about how much flexibility we should build in. Chair McDonald, I know you're a very, you like to keep our schedule full and active. Let's just say that, which is great because we are making progress. But I do think it is important that we do keep some time available for things that we're not aware of what are coming down the road here, and it is a little bit concerning, the list of things that we could put ourselves into, and I just want to make sure that we do leave a little space for us to be able to respond and react as necessary, particularly as the legislature moves and/or agencies might be looking for some additional thoughts or guidance from the Global Warming Commission. So just something to keep in mind, I think, is important.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner Ford. I like the idea of being able to kind of forecast to the greatest extent possible, because I think we do want to coordinate with a number of different agencies that are and entities that are doing really important work to implement aspects of the roadmap. And to advance the work that we'll be needing to do depending on the results of the legislation. And so I like the idea of being able to forecast it, but I think that will help those other entities know that we might come to them in February or sometime in the next 6 months on a topic, but at the same time retain that flexibility to shift things around. And I think we can find a good balance between, signaling our interest, but also trying to be responsive and adaptively manage our agenda.
Just one quick additional thought, which Commissioner Sharon's comments was well taken. I support her comments about inviting folks in, but I also think it's important for us to look outside our state boundaries and spend a little bit of time and energy, understanding and evaluating what's going on in other locations that may inform us. And so I do think we need some time in our agenda to hear from others and/or get reports out about what might be happening with our neighbors or across the country or elsewhere that could help inform us. So, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel either on things that good ideas that are coming from elsewhere. So, just another thought on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had some really good presentations in the past from Washington and California on work that are happening in those two states, and those are the ones that are coming to mind. That I remember us digging in on, but I'm sure there are a lot of other presentations that we've had in past meetings from time to time that have been, I think, really beneficial. We have a couple more minutes for this. Any other reactions to these kind of broader discussion questions?
Commissioner Reitman here. I guess I'm wondering how to incorporate the comments that I'm receiving from the commodity organizations, and it's related to the Natural and Working Lands committee work, which has done very well, I might add, and I'm very pleased with what they're doing. So I just want to make sure we don't alienate, a whole sector of producers in the state because we didn't listen to them at the get-go. So just a reminder that, and I thought the comment that Lisa made about everybody wants to be recognized for what they're doing and what they're contributing. And I thought that was important to keep in mind too.
Absolutely. And we have through the process included commodity groups, but certainly that's something we want to do on an ongoing basis and make sure we're really being responsive to those concerns, to any concerns they might have, or just a knowledge that they're aware of that would benefit us.
Well,
So.
and I've assured them that the Oregon Global Commission wants to be inclusive of everybody and that we don't intend to alienate others, including the mainline organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Other reactions? I guess the one last thing, working on this work plan and developing the draft might be one of those things that a subcommittee could really help with. So I'll confer with Zach, but might be, let us know if you would be willing to be on a subcommittee. I think we would be looking at trying to get a draft for a subcommittee to review early in July in order to be able to post it early enough for a mid to late July commission meeting to review it. And so I don't want to commit to a subcommittee just in case that puts Zach in a bind in terms of being able to kind of take what he's heard and develop it out. But do let us know, and then once I confer, I'll reach back out to those who might be interested in participating in developing that draft, which I would anticipate would be maybe one follow-up meeting to be able to kind of dig in and react to some of what Zach and I might put together. Okay, with that, I think we need to go to public comment. And so Stacy and Zach, can you give us a sense of how many people want to sign up for public comment?
I'm just looking at the list and I don't see any hands yet. So if, just as a reminder, if folks want to make public comment, you should see a smiley face down at the bottom and then a hand next to it. And so if you just raise your hand, hit that button, that'll help us. Or if you have something in the chat, if you put something in the chat that you'd like to jump in and discuss, that'll help us too.
Excellent.
See Garrett from the Public Utility Commission.
Yeah, I figured I'd take this opportunity to kind of jump back to the climate pollution reduction grant discussion. And I wanted to emphasize that I think Colin and Janine did a great job with kind of presenting their overview of the plan. The PC just really wanted to second what they, or in this case maybe third, what they were saying with regard to the need to focus initially on making sure that any funding kind of gets directed towards existing plans and achieving kind of the existing state goals that that Oregon already has that are really intended to move towards decarbonizing the economy. You know, as has been noted here by a number of parties, there's a lot of work that's already ongoing. You know, PGE, as was noted at the beginning of this meeting, just submit their CEP, and as part of that, they have a number of goals around community-based renewable energy, energy storage, and those types of projects are going to be critical to seeing the state kind of achieve its decarbonization goals. And as was noted by Commissioner Apter, I think another key area that's going to require a lot of collaboration and proactive work is really in ensuring that federal funds are secured wherever possible, because whether it's transmission, renewable energy development, new technology development, there are a number of different elements that will need to be invested in order to achieve the state's broader policy objectives. And so, yeah, the PC is looking forward to you know, both creating venues and working within other agencies and parties' venues to really communicate around this and develop kind of comprehensive plans that can be implemented and foster further decarbonization going forward.
Great. Thank you, Garrett. Has anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, Chair McDonald. Pat Delaquil is
Great.
The other hand.
Oh, welcome, Pat.
Welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. With regards to the policy topics, I think your guiding principle really needs to be creating a state vision, because unfortunately, many of our regulatory and even legislative processes get siloed. And we have one set of activities for our electricity sector, one for gas. And I think the importance of the commission is to be able to look across the sectors and try to create a state goal, a state plan, build consensus around that, help coordinate those activities. And I think if there's one specific area that you could really dig into and to help create some consensus is to dig into this area of the full social accounting of our climate impacts, that not just the health, but the community benefits, the economic benefits of addressing it properly, et cetera. And I think that stronger accounting, going beyond just the you know, the social cost of carbon to try to quantify it for Oregonians, would really be a big step forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Pat. Zach, are there others that have signed up?
I don't see any other hands at the moment.
Okay, well then I will ask a question about the CPRG. Colin, you mentioned that Metro did not have the same deadline for submitting a proposal. Do you know the deadline that Metro is under, and what, if any, process they're using to get input from the public on what they propose? Are you still with us, Colin? Or Janine, can you jump in on that?
Thanks, Chair McDonald. I think Colin had to jump off, and I don't recall the deadline for Metro. Maybe Zach does, but we can certainly get back to you if he doesn't remember.
Yeah,
Thank you, Director Benner.
Sorry, I think it's the end of this month. And I see that Whitney's hand is raised, and she may be able to provide a bit more detail on this question. So if we can unmute her, that'd be awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Welcome.
Yeah, I stepped in for Colin. He had to take off for a second, but I wanted to share that we've been in close communication with Metro as they've been developing their application, and it is due on the 31st. And there is a plan moving forward to stay connected to the work that they're doing and align with their engagement. So ensuring we aren't asking folks to try and engage both on the state's plan separately from Metro's plan, but rather the state will, go to and participate in engagement opportunities that Metro is planning to host. And so conversations have started there, and we will continue to update you all on that front too.
Great, thank you. And I hadn't realized that the metro area would include Vancouver as well. So can I assume that there's good coordination on that front between the Oregon side of the metro area and the Washington side?
Yeah, that's a good challenge for Metro to navigate. And they do have, their networks already existing in close partnership, but I know that they are as well reaching out to the Washington state leads on the CPRG grant, because there's just so many levels of kind of coordination here. And it's a little bit of just a sticky way that the boundaries were drawn, I think, for the MSA and how to navigate this. So they are looping in with Vancouver.
Great, thank you. I was really pleased to hear how many states submitted grant proposals in work that I'm engaged in with my day job with the U.S. Climate Alliance. It seems like most climate action plans have been focused in states that are part of the alliance. And so which is 25, and taking that up to 46, it shows kind of the power of being able to make this kind of a grant opportunity available for states that might not otherwise be able to participate or motivated to participate without it. So that was very encouraging to hear.
Yeah, and there's one other piece I'll share, which is that there is a climate innovation team aspect of this grant, where EPA will be facilitating conversations nationally and regionally just to align the states who are working on specific pieces within their priority climate action plan and comprehensive. So it could be a really great way for us to just work alongside others and learn from others as we are all navigating this together.
That's great. I know there's been a lot of value in that with the U.S. Climate Alliance states of kind of comparing notes and figuring out how to go through this together. So that's great to hear that EPA is going to do that. Anyone else from the public? Zach, raise your hand.
I don't see anyone at the moment.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners for the good of the order today?
I see Tom jumped on camera. Do you want to make a comment?
Just quickly, I think moving forward, you have a very aggressive work plan if everything comes through. and especially if the legislative bills get passed where the Global Warming Commission would be involved. And so I think it just need to recognize when you come up with the work plan, resources that are available relative to your scope of work that you want to do. And also to make sure that with this federal funding, the CCAP work that the Global Warming Commission may be involved in, that it is complementary to the mission and work and is not a substitute, so that federal dollars do not substitute for necessarily state funding for the goals and work of the commission.
Great point, Commissioner Potowski. Good for us to kind of think that through as we go forward. And one thing that when Zach and I were conferring earlier this morning, that Zach reminded me is that if those two bills, if they are adopted, the Natural and Working Lands bill has a 91-day start date after it's signed, and the Senate Bill 522 would not start until January. Is that right, Zach?
That's
So
right. That's currently.
we wouldn't get additional resources until that time to be able to hire people. Is that also correct, Zach?
I think that's still to be determined on how the legislative session shakes out and how the budgets are made. But the SB 522 would go into effect in January, and then there may be ways to get at least the hiring started earlier, but still being explored, and obviously will be following the direction of the budgets as they come through.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zach. Well, if there are no other comments, I will close the May 22nd meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. Thank you all for your participation. Thanks to all the presenters for the incredibly great presentations to help us better understand all the things that are moving. It's gratifying to see work that will be carried on as part and benefit from the work that the commission did on the roadmap and natural working lands work. So thank you all. Thanks to the public who participated in the meeting. And we will send out a doodle poll shortly to set a meeting date for July. And that will focus on our work plan. We'll get another legislative update in advance of the work plan discussion so that we can really reflect that, and likely also put a topic or two on the outside of those two areas, possibly follow on with natural and working lands and or some of the other policy topics that were on the list that Zach shared. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be seeing you in a month or so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zach, do we want to set up a follow-on meeting?
Sure. If you have do you have a few minutes?
I do. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
I think I do anyway. I'm pretty sure.
All
All right.
I'll send around an invitation shortly. Thanks.
Thanks.